Hi there, BookTube, it's Ros, and as ever, when I've read some newly published fiction in particular that I enjoy, I'll try and make a quick video about it. And today, it's this one, Ripeness by Sarah Moss. Oh, that's a bit shiny, isn't it? That's better. Which came out this summer. So, it's a hot off the press novel at the moment. Now, it is Moss's 9th novel, I think. She's also written non-fiction, a couple of memoirs and some more sort of academic non-fiction. She's a British author. She was born in Scotland, grew up in the north of England, and lived in other parts of England, and now lives in Ireland. So she's done the rounds of the British Isles. She's as I say, an author, but also an academic. And I've read about half her novels, I think. And I'm really happy to say that this is a special novel. And I was actually kind of surprised and disappointed that it didn't appear on the book along list, which came out last week. Of course, not every good book of the year can, but I feel this would have sat very happily on that long list. It's a book with dual timelines, something that I quite enjoy in a book if an author pulls it off successfully. The two timelines in this, one is in the 1960s, one is in the present day. They both are about our central protagonist, Edith. So in the 1960s section, she's just turned 17. She's just finished school. She was young in her years, so she's going to be going off to university in a year's time, but she's encouraged to take a year off because she's young, and we meet her as she is setting off to Italy, partly in theory to practice her Italian, but actually she's been sent there by her mother to support her older sister who is pregnant and who's living in an Italian villa beside Lake Como in northern Italy. Heavily pregnant with her ballet dancer friends. Yeah, that's the 1960s setup. In the present day, Edith is, I think, in her early 70s. She's retired. She's divorced. She's, although she's grew up in Derbyshire, the Edith that we first meet, grew up on a farm in Derbyshire. She's lived most of her adult life in Ireland, and she's now living in rural west of Ireland, in what was a holiday cottage, which is kind of what she got when she divorced her husband. And she's living a comfortable life, although with a sense of being an incomer, as you always are somewhere like that, even if you've lived there, for donkey's years. But also, her life is not necessarily simple. And we get a strong sense in the book of how the ripples of events through her lifetime are still kind of playing out in her older age. It's quite a poignant book, I would say. It's rich in emotion and all sorts of emotion, love and sorrow and the big ones like that, but also embarrassment and social discomfort and shame and anxiety and anger, resentment, all of those. I particularly, I think one of the things you come to realise in the book is how Edith's emotional life as an older woman was shaped by her childhood, her unusual relationship with her mother, and the particular experiences that she had at 17, which are the theme of the 1960s timeline. And the 1960s timeline is written in the first person, and whereas the present day one is the third person, with an omniscient narrator. But what we realise is that the first person narrative of the 1960s is present day Edith's reminiscences. Almost, she's writing her recollections of that little window of time in her life, and she's writing it for a particular audience, for a particular person to read, and who that is kind of emerges through the book. That makes it it gives it a nice little puzzle, doesn't it? I would say my abiding feeling about this book is that it's a very humane book about people. Now, the author George Eliot pops up several times in this book. She's referenced a number of times, and one of the similarities, I would say, between this novel and Eliot's writing is that Moss, like Eliot, sees people in the round. She doesn't have kind of like black and white, obvious, baddies and goodies. She sees human beings with all their kind of like good choices and bad choices, their good behaviour and bad behaviour, and kind of accepts that and shows that in a very sort of humane way. I like that in a book, I think. I like that in Eliot, and I like that in this. Another thing that I really like in a book, which you will know if you watch this channel often, is a writer who can give a really strong sense of place. And Moss absolutely excels at that, and at description. So description of landscape, description of buildings, interiors, descriptions of food, descriptions of weather. If you live in the west of Ireland, you get a lot of weather, and there's a lot of weather in that part of the book, but also, in the Italian sections too. And she brings that really kind of superb descriptive technique also to a really key scene in the book, which is of childbirth. And really, it's one of the best descriptions of childbirth that I've ever read, I think. And the first few days of living with a newborn baby and caring for them, yeah, that was one of the most sort of startling elements in the book. She also brings in various sort of political and social themes, particularly ones around refugees and migration and sort of identity. How do you get to be Jewish or Irish? What makes you that? Is it about where you're born? Is it about who your parents are? Is it about what you grow up with? Yeah, those themes. She particularly draws out in through the eyes of Edith, present day Edith, the different responses that her neighbours in Ireland have to Ukrainian refugees, because this is, it's a very contemporary, it's written sort of like, COVID's just has happened, the Ukrainians, Russian invasion of Ukraine, Ukrainians coming to Ireland, all that is fresh. But their different response, to the Ukrainian refugees and to refugees from black refugees from sub-Saharan Africa. And, the character is angry about that, and she's angry about that because of the experience of her mother as a refugee from fleeing the Holocaust in the time of Nazi Germany, and that makes it a sort of powerful emotion for her, that and things about sort of loss and survivor guilt and so on are really strong in the book. But what is interesting is that Moss shows Edith having that anger and then almost like shifting kind of that outrage sort of diminishing, or that she kind of almost accepts that in order to maintain her friendships and her relationships with her Irish neighbours, she has to sort of almost swallow her outrage and just get on, and which is I found interesting. I read one review that sort of seemed a bit cross about that. But the point is that it's part of her, the way she writes really rounded characters, that that's perhaps, the reality of how you might think and feel and behave, because we're not perfect and we can be, shocked by something and then kind of accept it or get used to it in a pragmatic way because we have to, because we've got to get on with life. And getting on with life and that need to just kind of get through and accept life as it is where the book ends up, in a really kind of moving and beautiful ending, I thought, which made me very happy, because I love Moss as a writer, but I haven't always loved the endings of her books, and this time she absolutely nails it. So is it a warm recommendation? Obviously it is. I would love to hear if you've read this book and what you thought of it. If you loved it as much as I did, if you saw more flaws than I did, perhaps. Why did it not end up on the booker list? And if you haven't read it, do.